Nate is being used to plant this information. I wonder why.
Well, if they're using me, they ain't paying me. That's all I can say. And I assure you, if they were using me, I'd be getting a lot more views than I get on the channel.
Dude, lay off the weed.
I've laid off the weed for a long time, and now I'm focused on fitness, taking care of myself physically, get my family prepared for what may come, and you should too.
Can't take this channel seriously.
Well, I mean, that's your opinion, and I can't disagree with an opinion. I can disagree with facts, but you haven't presented any for me to disagree with.
Your mom?
No, yours.
Nate's just telling fairy tales this time. As a self-described prepper, I know he ain't never been through no SHTF situation.
I guess you have to define what you mean by an SHTF situation. I've been through some pretty hard times in life. I've been in several life-threatening scenarios. I've done some very awful jobs in my day, so I've been in some pretty precarious situations. I don't think you need to be in an SHTF situation to appreciate the fragility of the world we live in. In fact, if that was the case, then nobody would prepare. I mean, that's just a set of criteria to levy against a person. What we're looking at is holistic preparedness. So because there's a wide range of potential SHTF scenarios that could unfold, what can we do to prepare for everything?
Blah, blah, blah.
This is a profound statement, and I would love to know what sort of erudite content this individual does not relegate to blah, blah, blah.
Sorry, Nate. Call me a Luddite, but I don't trust AI as far as I can throw it.
I mean, you're not the only one. All of these technologies are double-edged swords, but we also have to learn how to leverage them, because if we don't, we run the risk of being left behind. Now, for some people, they're more than content with that. But if you want to be competitive and you want to function in the modern world, then you're going to have to familiarize yourself with these technologies. This doesn't mean that we're naive to the potential ways that they could be used against us and all of the potential risk factors there. I never want to be that old man who doesn't know how to use the TV remote. I just don't want to be that guy.
This channel is going downhill so fast.
Again, unless you specify exactly what you disagree with, then it's hard for me to extract anything of value from such a criticism. But criticisms are good because they motivate you to change. They motivate you to course correct, right? I would venture to say that we've been doing the exact same thing as we've been doing for the last 5 years. The only thing that has shifted in recent months is the political climate. So because I try to view things objectively, people get mad because now I'm making fun of their guy and not the previous guy. However, comments like this are incredibly motivating. Maybe there's some truth to this. Maybe we need to switch things up a little bit here and there, right? Maybe we need to course correct. There's always a way that the channel could improve.
This guy's just imploding because his taxpayer paycheck got cut off.
I presume that you're insinuating that I got funding from USAID, which is hilarious, number one, because I live in Canada. I assure you that Justin Trudeau, who I have openly railed against for years and years, is not sending me paychecks like they do the CBC. This is just another manifestation of your own derangement, right? So people can have derangement for anything. You can have Trudeau derangement, you can have Putin derangement, you can have Trump derangement, Musk derangement, but this is just so hilarious, because if there's people who actually believe that I get funding from the government to make these videos, really?
Bro, your biggest enemies are gonna be your YouTube followers. They know everything about you.
There's definitely some truth here, which is why when I first started the YouTube channel, I didn't even want to show my face in the videos. In fact, this is a natural process of slow burn reveal that pretty much every prepping channel goes through. You eventually show more and more and more. It's one thing that I've sacrificed is my own security in order to bring you guys this information every single day, which is why I've had to overkill on my own security. So yes, this is an obvious threat. It's a reality. It's something I'm prepared to deal with. I'm ready to deal with if and when the time comes. Now, the latter part of your statement, they know everything about you, is true and false. There's a lot they don't know. There's a lot I don't show, I assure you that much. But indeed, it's a unbalanced relationship. It's what they call a parasocial relationship. You guys know everything about me. I know absolutely nothing about you. However, I would say that if I'm influencing people, then in a sense, I do know something about you because, we're setting a lot of trends on this channel. We initiate a lot of trends. There's a parasocial component to having a prepping channel that has to be factored into our security plans.
As usual, nothing bad is ever gonna happen.
Actually, let's see. What has happened in the last 5 years? Editor?
You base all this information on what? Quit misleading people just to get views. You do not have any first-hand experience or expertise on anything that you talk about.
Well, actually, I base all the information on hours and hours of research from verifiable sources that you can go and fact-check and cross-reference. It's always interesting to me that comments like this seldom will ever specify exactly what it is they disagree with. It goes back to a question of preference. It's not that they can disprove what I'm saying, they just don't like what I'm saying. So this is why their responses are emotional, because they don't actually have an argument. In terms of first-hand experience and expertise, I'm not really sure how to interpret this either. Anybody can make inferences, valid inferences, on the basis of data. That's something that you don't actually need an honors degree, which I have, in order to do that. Anybody can do that nowadays.
Hey, Canadian Prepper needs to have a podcast with Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I would love to go on Joe Rogan, and I think, up until not too long ago, I was on that trajectory in order to do that, and I still could possibly do that at some point in the future, but I'm actually at a point right now where I want to develop the skills that are required so that I can speak authoritatively on matters of homesteading, because I believe that all preppers eventually become farmers. And so once I get to a point where I'm comfortable talking about that aspect of preparedness and everything that comes with it, in addition to all the knowledge that I've accumulated thus far, then I'll be well-rounded enough that I would love to go on various podcasts and speak perhaps more authoritatively about these issues. I've never claimed to be an expert prepper, believe it or not. Over the years, I've gained a little bit of knowledge here and there, but there are plenty of people in the space who are far more knowledgeable of prepping than I am, and I'm still learning. Interestingly, where many people have said that I excel is in my daily updates. That's my analytical thinking capability. I'm a better analyst than I am a prepper. Now, there's certainly value in sharing the perspective of being half analyst, half prepper. And hey, if Joe Rogan wants to have me on his program, and if you have a contact, put him in touch.
Hey Nate, you forgot to mention that when that EV battery spontaneously combusts, you're probably gonna die.
So I'm going to debunk this statement in two ways. There's actually a manual door release in Teslas. Most people don't even know it's there. Now, just like you guys, I prefer mechanical 9 times out of 10. I don't like the steer-by-wire concept that's on the Cybertruck, for example, which is why I'm not getting one. I don't like being beholden to wires and technology as much as the next prepper. However, EVs still have a place in preparedness, and I'm not going to beleaguer that point. The second thing is that this is so unlikely and statistically insignificant. The odds of a EV spontaneously combusting out of nowhere is like 1 in millions and millions. If it was actually statistically significant, you would never see any EVs on the road because Tesla would be bankrupt by lawsuits. And insurance companies are still providing coverage for these vehicles. That's a sign that this is nonsense. This doesn't mean the risk doesn't exist. It just means that it's an exceptionally low probability.
You're not a good person.
You know, it's funny because if I was a bad person, I would have a knee-jerk response and say, no, I'm a good person. I often think to myself, maybe I am a bad person, because the essence of being a good person is being contemplative about whether or not you're a good person, right? If you just assume that you're a good person all the time, then you might actually be a bad person. What I try to do is provide people good products at fair value. I don't have to do that. I don't have to have a store. I try to create a nice, safe work environment where people feel respected and where people are well paid. You know, you can ask any of the employees here that work for me here at Canadian Preparedness, am I a bit of a stickler? I think no more than any other boss would be. I think there's some pros and some cons. I'm always aspiring to be a better person and to do better. There are so many things that I could do in order to make money that I don't do because it goes against my principles. So I'm not saying that makes me a good person per se, but I certainly do have an ethical creed of sorts that I follow, which basically comes down to, the golden rule. I want to do good to others as they would do good to me.
Outsiders are food. Yes, folks, cannibalism will happen. It's time to prepare for it.
I mean, I've actually done whole videos on cannibalism. In fact, it was one of my first big videos, and I think it was actually demonetized because I used a pretty gory thumbnail for the video. But it's a topic that I'd like to revisit once again. I've talked about hunger in the past. I've cited numerous historical examples where people have resorted to cannibalism. I know this person is being perhaps a little bit facetious here, but there is some truth to it, and there's a dark reality that everybody potentially has to face, right? And it's really an ethical dilemma at some point. I'm not going to say much more about this, but what I will say is that you have to understand that people in the West, in particular, are conditioned to believe that eating meat is a normal everyday thing. And while there's only 30 million deer, more or less, on the North American continent, there just so happens to be nearly 400 million people, unfortunately. Now, I'm certainly never going to be one of those people who consumes the flesh of another, but I think there's a lot of people who might surprise themselves in terms of what they're willing to do in order to survive. And I think once you cross that threshold, there's no going back. You're a cannibal.
Canadian Prepper is making millions a year off scaring Americans.
Actually, I make thousands a year preparing Americans. There's a big difference. If you just come here to get scared and you're not prepared, then you're doing it all wrong. You see, the whole purpose of leveraging that fear is so that you prepare. If people are not scared, they're not going to prepare. Why would you prepare for something if you were not worried about it at all? So there has to be an element of fear there, but you don't want to be a panic prepper. You don't want to be a fear-based prepper entirely because you're going to burn yourself out. The preppers who endure, regardless of whether the world just goes to shit tomorrow or not, those people are not motivated by fear. Okay, they're forward-looking individuals. Bradley Garrett referred to it as more of a dread as opposed to a fear. It's a more enduring, underlying appreciation for how fragile everything is, as opposed to, I'm panicked, right? So, no, the goal is not to do that. Unfortunately, people like yourself contradictingly only will ever watch and comment on those videos, and you'll never click on a video which is actually solution focused, which we offer on the channel all the time.
You were wrong again.
I'm not really sure what this person was referring to, but I haven't been wrong in the longest time, and I'm not, trying to be conceited when I say this. Because I try to be as analytically astute as possible, I tend to cover my bases. So it's seldom that I'll actually make a clear and direct prediction because, of course, that's a gamble, right? If you say that such and such is going to happen on any given day, then if it doesn't happen on a certain day, then, obviously you're going to be wrong. If you go back to all my videos and you actually watch them closely, it's very seldom where I'm going to make a specific prediction that's going to happen on a specific day. So we deal mostly in probabilities. That said, I haven't been wrong about much in a long, long time. In fact, I'm calling pretty much everything play by play, hours before it happens, days, weeks, months before it happens for the last 5 years. Now, people will sometimes reference a thumbnail or a title, and they'll extrapolate that to suggest that I said that something was going to happen on a certain period of time, which of course has never been the case. And if I do, then typically it's because there's an overwhelming amount of evidence to support that, because one of those things that keeps me up at night, as I've said, is being wrong. So for example, 3 weeks ago, when I said that there is a very, very high probability that the market was going to correct or crash that week, the market did. It corrected that week immediately after I said that. When I expressed to you with a high degree of conviction that ceasefires are not going to be reached, and that Trump and Vladimir Putin, that it's all a dog and pony show, and it's very likely that the war is going to continue to escalate, I've been right about all of that. I was talking about World War III before anybody on the right was talking about it, before it was like a daily Alex Jones broadcast. They only talked about it when it was politically useful, when it was election season. And as soon as it wasn't useful anymore, they stopped talking about it. It's because I'm not beholden to either political party that I maintain consistency with that.
Hey Nate, by looking at all these comments, it's clear to me that people just don't like bad news.
As a person who's done this day in and day out for many years now, this is actually a fascinating question to ponder. Is it that people don't like bad news, or do they like bad news? Generally speaking, the content that gets the most views on YouTube isn't the bad news content. If you look on the trending page, for example, it's all positive, uplifting content. I used to work at Blockbuster Video. The horror section was actually really small. The drama section was huge. The comedy section was huge. The action section was huge. That's what people want. Horror is a very small genre of Hollywood. Now, do people want to be scared? Yeah, people like the thrill of it all, right? They like to feel like they're special and they're living in an exceptional period of time. That's what they like to think. But on the whole, I generally agree with you. I think these people who are in denial, it's quite possible that their understanding of SHTF is even more congruent with what the reality would be than fantasy preppers. And it's because of that very thing that they must deny that it's ever a possibility, because they know they'll always be ill prepared for it. Now, I don't agree with that. I think it's better that you prepare. But yeah, a lot of people are just in denial, right? That's part of the stages of grief. Many of the comments that we get on the channel are going to be one of those things. You're going to get people who are in denial. You're just Chicken Little, blah, blah, blah. You're going to get people who are bargaining, well, what if this, what if that? And actually, bargaining is probably one of the most rational viewpoints to take, because you're looking at all the angles. You're saying, okay, well, there's a possibility that this negative event could unfold, but maybe this, but maybe that. Then you get the people who are angry, and you have to ask, why are they still here, right? It's because they're in the process of accepting that I'm actually right on the channel about everything that we talk about. And so they're just in an anger phase, and this is why I have to be sympathetic to them. You'll also get people who are further along in this process who come on the channel and they write things like, well, I just don't want to live. This is a world I would never want to live in. That's definitely not a place you want to be either. You don't want to be fatalistic about this stuff. And finally, you get to the point where you realize, yeah, there is something I can do about it. I know that myself personally, I had to go through those processes. Absolutely. If you actually look back throughout your evolution into becoming a prepper, I bet you any money that you went through those stages of grief at one point or another.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com. where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.